Welcome back to Faith and Family Conversations. I'm Michelle Anthony, and we're in a series on faith, healthy habits. Today, our topic is pure eyes and pure hearts. I don't know, but as a mother, this is such an important issue for me. As a wife, this is such an important issue for me. We live in a world that is not pure. We live in a world that is attacking our marriages and our children's minds and hearts. And it's not just about having pure eyes, right? It comes from a pure heart. Wow. What does the Bible say about this? How are we engaging in it? Let's start with some biblical foundations.
I think from the get-go, like, what is so important to say is, yes, we live in a world that is so not pure, but we are submitted to and we serve a God who absolutely is, who created that world, who stands sovereign and Lord over that world, and who is in the business of redeeming that world, right? You know, so I think whenever we enter into this conversation, the feelings of guilt, shame, all of those start running to the surface, or maybe just absolute pain, bondage. You know, is this something I can ever get free from? You know, and just to like name, you know, specifically, when we're talking about pure eyes, pure hearts, we're talking about, you know, the concept of pornography, sexual addiction. And I think whenever we talk about this, again, we can talk about how we do not live in a pure world, but we do have a pure God, and we have a God who actually, it was his idea to create sex. It was his idea to create intimacy between a man and a woman, a husband and a wife. And so whenever we talk about this, we're talking about a gift from God that has been corrupted and twisted like many other gifts, right? When we're talking about something that is affecting families and our culture to this magnitude.
Right. I love that you started with that. This was a gift from God. He imagined it. Sex is something, he made us as sexual beings. That isn't something that the world thought of. That was his mind. And of course, the enemy of God always seeks to destroy and kill anything that God finds beautiful. So with that starting point, and then sin has entered the world, and sin, we are sinful creatures. It has been marred. And what are the impacts of that? And then what is God's solution for that?
I like that we are starting, and we'll start and end with the hope and the healing.
Right.
You know, but right in the middle is harm. And there's so much harm going on. And that's why we want to talk about it here, because we're thinking about faith and family. We're not going to pretend all is well when it isn't. But we still see the hope. We still see the healing. But the best way to have hope that moves us toward healing is addressing the issues that are harmful. So we do want to talk about it. Talk about it in a positive way, with a positive tone, not hate and condemning, but grace and God guiding us through that journey. I invest a lot of time with those who are battling addictive behaviors related to sexual issues. And, you know, I'm always of the opinion that the issue they think they need to deal with is not the deepest issue. It is a way they have responded to deeper issues.
Where they cope with it.
It's just like, what do they need? Well, in my opinion, it needs to start with conversations. That's what we're having now. So when I sit at a table with a student or a parishioner or a friend or someone that I'm offering pastoral care and counseling to, I just ask open-ended questions. And they may start here, but we move them toward the deeper issues. And so often it is harm, deep hurt in their lives that they've lived in denial of, and they found ways to get some type of pleasure that's easy to get these days, but it is very, very harmful. So let's remember to deal with the deep issues, not just stay on the surface. Let's deal with the deep issues
after the heart,
and believe that God wants to heal us in those places. I mean, Romans 12, let's be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's the life that we're talking about in Faith and Family. That is, we're being transformed, not by fingers pointing at us and saying, you should never do this again. You're so bad. It is like, I'm inviting you toward healing. You need to be healed. And I'm of the opinion that it needs to start with an awareness of I have issues that I need to address. And I need to pursue healing. And those can come through conversations and prayers and people around us.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because there's probably a lot of parents, grandparents, guardians listening to this right now thinking my son or my daughter has become involved in pornography, or I caught them, or I've heard about it, or whatever it is. And their answer is just stop doing it. Just stop looking at it, stop absorbing it, and out of fear, right? Out of loving fear, they don't want their child to fall into this. And the ramifications, or a spouse has caught their spouse engaging in this, and so it's just stop. You're ruining our marriage. And what you're talking about is to take a step back from the judgment, although of course we have that, but take a step back and to say what's going on. And you're talking about self-medicating of a moment of pleasure because there's deep-seated pain.
Yeah.
I think that's difficult for us as parents, as spouses, to do that. But you're kind of a third space for them. You're acting as a counselor in that way, and that maybe that situation needs some counseling outside.
And I feel like we have erred, all of us, not pointing fingers at anybody, but we've erred on the side of, well, our culture has put the green light. People can do anything they want to, and is supporting porn and these other things. But we've responded to that by just turn on the red light, just make everybody stop.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm like, we need a yellow light, some caution for conversation, but we need some turn signals to help them know a direction that they may not have known otherwise if we don't help them
how to navigate,
go on a better path. And there are other paths that we can offer to them.
So if sexual addictions, pornography, things that you're dealing with, and you're classifying those as a symptom that's revealing some broken place, have you found that when you're able to go there with that person and identify the broken place, that you're finding some victory in these manifestations?
Yeah, lonely people that finally feel loved by the Lord. Lonely people that have found this substitute, and now they're finding healing. And sometimes finding that hope is best done at a table around others, not in the singular, but in the plural.
Yeah.
Who are you willing to talk to about your issues? And if somebody comes and talks to you, who can you help them be a part of a community with so they can get help? We just try to defeat all of the enemy's strengths on our own ability.
Well, there's a lot of shame around it. So shame isolates us. I mean, you're raising teenagers right now and young kids. What are the kinds of conversations you're having with your children?
Well, I think, a few generations ago, and maybe less than a few, it was something very taboo to talk about. Yeah. And I think Christian parents didn't know, it was shameful. And I think even as a parent, if you find out, you discover that your child is engaging in this type of behavior, then you feel shame yourself and you don't want it out and you just want to pretend like it's not there. And so that is harmful. I mean, sin thrives in the darkness.
That's right.
It does. And so one of the things that we have tried to do as parents is just to be very open about conversations about sexuality in general, to make it positive, like you were talking about, like to realize, hey, this is a gift. When this is a part of our lives in the way that God intended, this is a wonderful gift that He's given us. But like any gift that He gives us, when we use it outside of the boundaries the way He's intended, it can be incredibly damaging. And so, but just to say, hey, we're gonna let this be an easy conversation for us. So we want to start early talking about it. And I think just having that conversation and being open, so that they don't feel like they're just alone. That aloneness, I think you're so right about it flourishes in the darkness and in the aloneness.
Yeah.
And loneliness.
And loneliness,
right?
yes.
Coming out of the pandemic, we've seen statistics on pornography and sexual addiction just skyrocket. And one of the fastest growing demographics of that is women. I think for so long we've thought about addictions and pornography as just a largely male issue, and that's just not true. And I think for our families who are listening to understand that your daughters are just as susceptible as your sons, and your wives are just as susceptible as your husbands.
Yeah. And I think as a culture outside of the church, we've normalized sexuality in a way and operating sexual ways that's not true and right and good and beautiful. And so when we don't talk about it, when the church keeps it in the darkness, but they are talking about it all the time,
That's good.
then if that's the only thing they're hearing, then that starts to make sense to them. You know, it feels like, well,
They're the only ones talking
I
about
haven't
it.
heard otherwise.
Yeah, I haven't heard otherwise.
Yeah, I think the way Paul talks about this in the New Testament is really, really fascinating, because I think sometimes what we can do is when we start talking about, you know, what's the objective with sex here? What's the objective? Like, what is this for? And oftentimes, you know, especially if you look back to 15, 20 years ago, there was like this massive purity movement, right? Like you get your purity ring and you
purity balls.
You don't do anything until marriage, and this is this taboo thing. And then all of a sudden you have all of these kids like getting married, and it's like sex was so taboo up to that time that even in marriage, it's like, what is sex supposed to be? And I love what Paul, when Paul talks in Colossians, he opens up Colossians 3 with talking about how we are hidden with Christ in God, right? Like this is the reality of the believer. Like you have been placed as a son or a daughter of the Most High God in the intimacy, the fellowship of God the Father, God the Son. And that is what's true about you. And then he pivots in verse 5. He says, therefore, put to death sexual immorality, impurity, all of these things that would hinder your ability to experience that intimacy. And I think like what you're talking about when you're counseling young people, and you're coming to find that there is a huge bit of loneliness. There's this absence of intimacy. It's because we've embraced this lie that this is not what is true about us. And if that's not what's true about me, then I have to find that intimacy somewhere else. And so then all of a sudden, then the North Star or the goal for sexual integrity is not that I don't struggle. That's not necessarily the goal. Is that whenever I'm experiencing pain in this area, I'm running to the place and to the person who can satisfy my soul. So this is no longer than about behavior. This is about relationship and intimacy with the Most High God.
Really good.
And that makes the point. It moves us to Christ.
Yes.
And Kristi, you were in my class recently, and the whole emphasis there is the divine romance. Let's use God created imagination. Let's not just fuss about we're using them the wrong way. Let's use them the right way.
So good.
Put Jesus there at the table. Put Jesus beside the computer screen. Jesus is the one that loves us, and he's guiding us to this place of true love as he's transforming us to be like him. I just love that. And that is the divine romance. You know, this is not just like religious duties, follow this list. It's the divine romance that moves us to a place of, I'm being healed. I'm being healed. I no longer have to do this. And when I hold guys accountable and we try to encourage one another, I don't want them to fight this war alone. I want them to fight together with others to help, but with Jesus, that face of hope beside them.
So good, Chris.
I tell a story quite often, and when I'm speaking or in my books, because it's so poignant, and it's about a father who is having a conversation with his preteen son about this, and just saying, hey, you know, God, this is how God made you, and this is the world we live in, and so your mother and I have put together these safeguards to protect you, and all the things, and so if you choose to do it, there's going to be consequences. First of all, I think that's a good dad, because I don't know if dads are having this conversation, if moms are having this conversation. So we want parents to be having the conversation. You have to get past your own comfortableness, right? And just have the conversation. And ask questions. Be curious. They live in a different world than you grew up in. That's okay. Ask questions about it. However, consider that same dad and that same preteen son. He's sitting down, he's saying, this is the way God made you, this is what it's intended for, this is the way the world has marred that. So we've set up these things to protect you. If you don't, there's consequences. But I too am a man who live in this world, and I too am bombarded by these images. I too am tempted to sin.
You don't graduate from this.
Right.
Yeah,
You don't graduate
from
from
this.
this. And so you can come to me. You can come to me with this. We are on the same journey together.
Yes.
And I wonder if our homes, if husbands and wives and parents and children could come together and they're having the same journey
Yes.
of faith. And these are the scriptures we memorize to protect our hearts. We might not sin against these are the people I call or text when
Yes.
I'm tempted. These are the kinds of prayers I pray. If we were to share that instead of withhold that from the people we love the most, I wonder if the world would feel a little different. We enter into the pain together.
Right.
Yes.
And when we have sinned, and we all sin,
Yes.
we all fall short of the glory of God,
Mm-hmm.
then we allow him to reclaim that and bring it back. And that's a long journey, and that's a hard journey, and we shouldn't have to do that alone.
Yeah.
Well, we know that when we're having a conversation like this, that it conjures up a lot of mixed emotions and pain. And so if you want more resources about that, or you want to dig deeper into this, we just want you to check out our website for some of those further resources. And thank you for being with us today.